Eventually, the scientific community began to fight back against the global warming scam and its objectives. It started in Germany in 1992 at the University of Heidelberg, then 5 years later at the University in Leipzig, followed by a major effort organized in Oregon. Even a department of the U.S. Senate ran a major project in 2007 against the global warming doctrine. Then a year later, another major protest project was launched from the U.S. through the Internet. In a 1999 article, Dr. Hugh Alsacer tells us of the Heidelberg appeal to the scientific community in 1992 that over 4,000 scientists responded to. It was hoped that such a high-level voice would have an impact on the policymakers at the Rio Earth Summit. Their voice wasn't heard. He states that over 35 organizations were publicly standing against the global warming doctrine at the time, whose voices were not heard either. Dr. Hugh Alsacer also writes about the Leipzig Declaration that started at the International Symposium on the Greenhouse Controversy and Ozone Problem in Leipzig. As an atmospheric scientist associated with the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory of 23 years and spending 20 years as an air weather officer for the U.S. Air Force, he was standing at the forefront in the field of climate science. He was pleased to report that the Leipzig Declaration project, which had solicited only meteorologists and climate specialists, had collected 110 signatures of this highly specialized group. Their statement in opposition to the global warming doctrine was submitted to the Kyoto Climate Conference, but again their voices were not heard. He also speaks about the Oregon Petition Project. The project against the global warming doctrine was launched in the shadow of the Kyoto Agreements that was referred by Russia's Academy of Science as a global suicide pact. The project was focused on all scientists worldwide to gain their written support for a campaign to urge the nations to subsequently reject the Kyoto Agreements. The world responded with 17,000 signatures from scientists, most of them with high degrees, opposing the unscientific assumptions of the global warming dogma. In the shadow of this global protest, only roughly 15% of the nations that signed the Kyoto Protocol ratified it, which adds up to an 85% rejection of Kyoto, and the first real breakthrough by the science community in its fight against the global warming doctrine. The Senate report presents a collection of over 400 detailed submissions, mostly from the academic community, outlining the individual's reason for opposing the global warming dogma. Similar to the Oregon Petition Project, in 1998, a new online project has been launched that is still ongoing. For this, the respondents must print a form that must be mailed and signed with their academic standing indicated. More than 30,000 scientists from across the world have made the effort to do this. The scientific community is indeed fighting back. Even some people of the oligarchy are joining the fight, as in the case in 2009 where the scientific fraud behind the global warming doctrine was exposed during the Copenhagen Climate Change Conference. In the time frame of the Copenhagen Climate Conference, Viscount Lord Christopher Monckton appeared on the website Climate Depot, run by Mark Morano, former aide to U.S. Senator James Inhofe. Lord Monckton blasted what he called the tiny, close-knit clique of climate scientists who invented and now drive the global warming fraud, adding, "For fraud is what we now know it to be." He pointed to thousands of emails that had been circulated by a whistleblower at the University of East Anglia, which prove the point of fraud, such as that climate data were arbitrarily altered. He further cites a revealing 15,000-line document from the Computer Division at the Climate Research Unit that shows that the programs and data are a hopeless, tangled mess, so that in effect, the global temperature trends have simply been made up. However, the empire is also getting boisterous. In Copenhagen, the genocidal objective for the climate fraud was openly laid on the table. The London School of Economics, the anchor of the Fabian Society that the government supports, has produced a study for the Copenhagen Conference that was released by the British Optimum Population Trust. The study is demanding the reduction of the world population by between 3 to 5 billion people between now and 2050. This brutal call for mass extermination is based on the argument that the single greatest cause of global warming is overpopulation, and that the most cost-effective cure for global warming is radical population reduction. Eliminating 3 to 5 billion people means eliminating 50% to 75% of humanity, and all in the name of global warming. That is a fraud to begin with. What does it all mean? It means genocide in the name of global warming, or climate change, as it is called of late, and the push for genocide will continue until humanity commits itself to die into population, or commits itself to respond to the real climate change before it of the next ice age glaciation cycle. With the 17th United Nations Climate Change Conference already scheduled to be held in Durban, South Africa, in November and December 2011, the push for genocide will likely continue since the Ice Age reality remains to be a forbidden subject, as it has been since 1974. Only 3 aspects are certain on the climate front. Number 1. The man-made global warming is not happening, because carbon gases have no effect on the global climate, and humanity's contribution to them is minuscule. Number 2. The next ice age glaciation cycle is coming, no matter how intense the carbon swindle is promoted to hide the reality of the normal ice age climate, and its glaciation, that will resume in the near future. Number 3. Humanity will perish if it fails to prepare itself for the effects of the coming ice age glaciation climate. All this means that we should reconsider once more what the scientific community had started in the early 1970s, before it was all turned upside down in 1974, resulting in a trail of corpses from many aspects of numerous silent holocausts. The corpses are numbered in the hundreds of millions, silently murdered by poverty, by prevented development, by economic destruction, by monetarist looting, by hunger, and increasingly by starvation, such as in the shadow of the imperial burning of humanity's food in the name of global warming. But none of this is forced. Society has become compliant on the entire front, to the point of preventing its critically necessary Ice Age renaissance. This means that the Ice Age question has a very large social component. It is hard in the shadow of this component to turn the clock back to 1974 and to move in the opposite direction, the direction of the general welfare that has been scoffed at increasingly in the quest for profit and is rapidly being scrapped, and then to move on into a human direction and to develop Africa and the world powerfully and creatively, to make the deserts bloom, to build bridges spanning the oceans, to build new cities for free, and to place new agriculture afloat onto the tropical sea where ample space for it exists, or to build indoor agriculture with artificial environments, in the context of a new industrial revolution. And all of this put together means that we need to pull out all the stops in our time towards getting the needed Ice Age renaissance off the ground. It means scrapping imperial monetarism and starting a new industrial revolution with a massive development in thorium nuclear power, basalt technology, and technologies for tapping into the galactic power streams. It also means that we need to take these steps now, not 1,000 years from now. We are at the stage now when no one can tell whether today's ongoing global cooling is the start of the transition to the next full Ice Age glaciation, or whether it will reverse itself for another 100 years. The Russian physicists Bashkirtsev and Michnich of the Solar and Terrestrial Institute in Irkutsk predict that the current cold trend will bottom out with the deepest cold in the late 2020s, as it did in the 1500s and the 1600s, and may then reverse. Let's take a look at what this means. The cooling trend began sharply in 1998, according to on-the-ground measurements recorded in Irkutsk. The scientists there predict a 30-year progressive cooling. We are presently a third of the way in this period with a trend of increasingly destructive weather patterns. We see more frequent unprecedented flooding, increases in tornadoes and hurricanes, and at the same time increasing droughts and wildfires. In many areas, planting is delayed by the flooding and colder climate, and what is planted is emerging too late. The resulting agricultural losses are already at a horrific level, while we are only a third of the way to the bottom of the expected cooling trend. Whether or not this trend will reverse itself in the 2030s is insignificant right now. We are in a transition zone right now where long-established climate systems begin to shift and tumble. The world food supply was badly hit in 2010, with massive crop losses that became reflected in sharp price increases. The way 2011 is shaping up, the world food situation will likely be dramatically worse. We face the dynamics of the Ice Age challenge already. It's here now, not in the distant future. But we are facing it with our eyes closed, supposing it to be just a freak anomaly. We need to respond to the Ice Age challenge now, with massive increases in infrastructure construction for agricultural protection, expansion, and relocation to protected regions. For all that we are able to know, the Ice Age transition may have already begun. If humanity had responded to the scientific community in the 1970s when the concerns were raised, the now unfolding food crisis could have been avoided. While the 30-year cooling prediction, issued by the scientist in Irkutsk, is just speculation, others predict that we are moving into a much larger century-long Little Ice Age. While this too is just speculation, it is immoral to the extreme to gamble on it that the Ice Age transition may not happen for another 1,000 years, because then no preparations will be made to protect our food supply. It is grossly immoral to subject the welfare of humanity to such gambling, in which billions will perish if the gamble fails. The world is presently in a food crisis because society had gambled on global warming that didn't happen, while global cooling happened instead. That is now causing a sharp increase in snowfall, rainfall, flooding, droughts, wildfire, tornadoes, hurricanes, and other agricultural devastation, which are all results of the same fundamental weakening in the electrodynamic environment that we have absolutely no control over at the present time, but have the capacity to protect us from it. We can't avoid tornadoes until we learn to control the Earth's electric environment. Tornadoes are electric phenomena. When localized temperature differences on the ground cause increased cloud convection with effects that reach high into the stratosphere, an electric connection becomes established between the ionosphere and the Earth. This happens typically in the later part of the day, when the ionosphere begins to drop down to lower levels. The resulting free-flowing electric currents are magnetically self-twisting by the electromagnetic principle that is known as the Birkeland current principle. The twisting currents, which usually form clouds by electric ionization, become the tornadoes that can produce rotating air currents with speeds exceeding 400 kilometers an hour. Tornadoes can be perceived as a type of lightning that is of lesser intensity and without the typical bright plasma channels that are associated with instant discharge events. Tornadoes are produced by a much slower electric discharge that is sustained for longer periods, long enough for the tornadoes to move along the ground for a few miles, or a few dozen miles, until the discharge potential is dissipated. Hurricanes, also called tropical cyclones, are likewise electric phenomena caused by the same principle, but are larger. They occur in tropical regions, where the air current convection can establish an electric connection with the equatorial electric jets in the ionosphere. The electric currents in the electric jets are so strong that they can be detected from space as two distinct bands surrounding the Earth at the magnetic equator. Hurricanes are more powerful, being linked into the stronger electric currents that the electric jets provide and can sustain for long periods. Up to 100 tropical cyclones occur each year in various regions near the equatorial electric jets. The reason why we are seeing an increase in the number of tornadoes is the result of the now increasing cosmic ray density that reflects the weakening of our sun and its heliosphere. The weaker sun results in a weaker heliosphere that lets more cosmic rays through its weaker barrier. The increase in cosmic rays increases the cloud formation, which takes more water vapor out of the atmosphere. The reduced water vapor density reduces the greenhouse effect, which is 97% caused by water vapor. With the moderating effect of the greenhouse reduced, greater local temperature differences result that cause stronger air current convections that now reach more often into the stratosphere and connect up with the ionosphere. The changing weather patterns that we are beginning to experience are all the natural consequences of our weakening sun, that reflects a weaker electric environment that it is a part of.